From the beginning of time, humans have harnessed the power of the wind to traverse the waters of the world by boat. Sailboats are one of the world's oldest forms of man-made transportation. One of the oldest images of a boat is featured on hieroglyphs in the ancient temples and pyramids of Egypt. In the Bahamas, every chapter of our history begins with the fact that someone from somewhere came to these islands by boat. The first inhabitants of the Bahamas, the Lucayan Indians, Christopher Columbus, the Loyalists who landed on Abaco, the Lutheran adventurers seeking religious freedom, the pirates who made these islands their base of operations, the African slaves who were shipped here as forced labor for the plantations of the colonies, all came by boat. International and inter-island trade was also facilitated by sailboats. Captains transporting their goods from the islands to New Providence would often race each other on the way home. Over time, as competition grew, builders would tweak the design of these boats to make them faster. Wives and families would line the shores to watch the boats coming in to see who was the fastest. These were the first regattas. Races were formalized into the sloop sailing regattas we now know. Rules were adopted from international sailing. On the world stage, the Bahamas had begun to make a name for itself in the sport of sailing. In 1964, the small colony in the Caribbean sat atop the sailing world when Sir Durward Knowles and Cecil Cook won gold at the Tokyo Olympics. Even today, most Bahamians carry around a memento of our affinity for sailing. Between then and now, the sport of sailing has generated a lot of history, some of which we'll begin to talk about tonight.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to part 2 in a 5-part series, The Story of Sailing. Sailing is a sport that many say defines us as Bahamians, and tonight's show will focus on the history of the sport of sailing and the birth of regattas. This program, a production of the Ministry of Agriculture and Marine Resources in conjunction with the Broadcasting Corporation of the Bahamas. Our hope is by the time we're done, more of you will be up to date on the sport of sailing in the Bahamas. My co-host once again this evening is the beautiful Kelsey Johnson.
Also joining us tonight on the broadcast is race organizer and coordinator and National Family Island Regatta Hall of Famer, Mr. Stafford Brister, boat builder, educator, and skipper, Sheldon Gibson, and by Zoom, Commodore of the National Family Island Regatta and longtime sailing historian, Mr. Danny Strawn. We are in for another great show. Our resident entertainer tonight is no other than DJ Pat. And guess who we have in studio tonight? Two of the Bahamas' top entertainers, Miss Tell All I Ain't Here Veronica and Mr. Jamming Gino D.
Well, Stafford and Donnie, welcome back. And Sheldon, welcome to the Story of Sailing. We start off again. Where did it all start?
Well, first I'm going to say good afternoon or good evening to all of my sailing fans, friends, regatta committees. A pleasant good afternoon to everybody. Now, we started sailing back when I was a little boy. That's 60 plus years ago. Not giving away my age. But 60 plus years ago, sailing was a way of life for us in the Bahamas. And sloop sailing, we had the dinghy boats that we had to use on the family island. And those boats were used for transportation, to go fishing, to go crawfishing, to go sponging, and the like. The necessity was when you have to go from one settlement to the other, we had to use those boats as transportation. The roads were not good. There was not, we didn't have any vehicles like cars and all of that. We had maybe had a bicycle or two, but we had to go from settlement to settlement in the sloop, in the little small dinghy boats. And that was the way of life for us. We enjoyed that. Thus, most of the young men and some of the young women who grew up on the island, they got into sailing at a very young age like myself. I remember sailing when I was about 5 years old, when I could hardly stand up in the boat to hold the tiller stick. I used to sail with my daddy. We go fishing, we come back with our catch. Now, every holiday, you would find that those same gentlemen who used those boats for fishing, they used to use those boats to do little races among themselves. Like, take for instance, a settlement like Smithsville that I grew up in, a small settlement in the Big Andros, the Bluff and Camps Bay, they were nearest to each other. All of those guys had dinghy boats. We only had dinghy boats at that time to use. And at about 5 years old, I remember going in the regatta, they call it then. The regatta used to be the Empire Day Regatta. And I was used as the bailer. Now, for people who don't know what a bailer is, while you're sailing, the boat can take in a lot of water. And because the boat is taking a lot of water, you need somebody to continue to bail the water out, to keep the boat trim, because water takes the boat out of trim. So I was the bailer. They had this thing called a coker. I don't know where it came from, but it was a hard, nutshell thing that they cut in half, and you couldn't break it with your hand. And that is what we used to use to bail the boat. Other than that, we had, like, you find the gentlemen then would go on the beach, not the beach, the bay. We called it the bay at that time. They're on the bay arguing, man, my boat could beat your boat. And this is how we started racing. Fellas say, my boat could beat your boat. So they'll put up a bet. So I bet you a quarter standard, my boat could beat yours. So fellas say, okay, let's go for the sham. What they call the sham, we go there and we would have races like two boats come together, share off, go in different direction, come back together. Now, if you cut me once, that's one cut. You go back again, you got to beat me 2 to 3. The fella that win, when we get short, the guy who lose, he go buy the bottle of rum, and they would all drink that bottle of rum together. And that was the fun of it. Back then, the rules in sailing was gentleman's rule.
Before we get into more, because we have lots of questions to ask tonight. Danny, what is your impression of the first days of sailing?
Well, just following up on what Stafford said, first of all, good night to the Bahamas and everybody who's listening in tonight. Well, the first days of sailing, you talk about sailing just for the fun of it. But when you think in terms of organized sailing, the first organized sailing regatta took place in 1954 in Georgetown, Exuma. It was organized by the Rhode Island Squadron, which was led by Bobby Simnett, who was an extraordinary businessman. Bobby Simnett was responsible for bringing the yachting community to the whole entire, Bahamas. And he, of course, when he did that, they all realized that the Exumas was a yachting paradise. And so Exuma had all of the ingredients to start what you may call an organized sloop sailing regatta. So it all started there in 1954 with Bobby Simnett and the Rhode Island Squadron, which consisted of many persons: Linton Rigg, Freddie Brown, Donald McKinney, Ward Beelup, and Linton Rigg. So those were the persons who actually started the regatta. What they did before they started sailing in Georgetown, they went and they, went to all the Family Islands to determine where should we have this event for these smart boats. And at the end of the day, they decided upon Exuma and Elizabeth Harbor would be the place to have it. They realized that motorized transportation was going to be the thing of the future. And they really didn't want to allow these beautiful smart boats just to become extinct. And the second thing was that they wanted to keep it going because Bahamian boat building skill needed to be, secured and continued. And so that's why it all started there.
About the regatta, am I mispronouncing it right? Regatta?
Regret.
So can you tell us what was the first organized regatta? Because it's a difference between regatta and regatta.
Yeah, like Danny said, the first organized regatta was in 1954.
Well, I just said the first organized regatta.
In 54 in Georgetown, Elizabeth Harbor, Georgetown, Exuma. That was the first organized regatta. There was a lot of talk behind, and just briefly, a lot of talk was behind this regatta thing, because people who go to the regatta, when they come home, they have a lot of regrets.
What is regatta?
Well, Fisher, I don't have a dictionary, or Danny could chime in after I would tell you a little bit about it. The regatta was that you go to the regatta, you come back home, you didn't win anything, you regret going there because your wife robbing you, she could beat upon you, and you lose what you had, so you regret going there.
Not saying how old you and Donnie is, but on the screen we can see some of the first magazines from the regatta. You remember publishing that?
No, I didn't publish that. I didn't tell you that.
What about you, Danny?
Well, I read it. I know it was published by the Rhode Island Squadron. So, an international writers who converged on Georgetown in 1954 and put all of that together. So that gives you up the event.
Well, Stafford, it looks like it was a money bag back in the day, £100 for the first prize winner.
Yeah, and the thing is, surprisingly enough, when Danny gave us that information, the £100 then, if you look at the price that we have now, it wasn't much different. The value of the money, it really isn't much different now, but we have a lot more boats now. We have plenty more boats than we had back at the first regatta.
How many boats was there at the first regatta? You imagine.
I think, Danny, you have that number, I think it was 70?
70?
We had 70 boats during the first regatta. And about 3 years ago, Fisher, we had about 77 boats in Georgetown. So that's remarkable that the sport is here to stay and it's not going anyplace.
And we normally nowadays, we attract a lot of international riders. Back then, how was it in terms of international riders coming in for this event?
Well, international riders are still coming fishing. They come every year. And I say from the general audience, the National Family Island Regatta is almost like a U.S. football, whereby people would come and they would secure or their tickets. In this particular case, they would book their rooms before they leave Georgetown for the following year. And that has been going on for years. The good thing about the regatta throughout this country is the fact that it's the only sport that has an economic component to it, because wherever it goes, it creates economic activities, and as a result, that you see business houses, rental cars, apartments, homes, etc. So that is the beauty about this regatta. That's why we have to keep the tradition going.
When did they start onshore activities with the stalls and all the singing and the hoopla? When did that start to make it such a fanfare event?
Danny would be a better one with the exact date on that, but it started late in Exuma. Because when we first started sailing and having regattas, persons would be on the beach, on the bay, we call it, selling their wares like candies and little bread and stuff like that. But now it first started in Georgetown, Exuma, where they began having stalls and all of that. But Danny would have that date on the time that really started.
Did that change the atmosphere of regattas?
Yeah, it did, because the economic boost that it brought to the island, the natives on the island, they made a lot of money from their wares that they're selling, the food, the drinks, and the island and the island stuff that they had.
Mr. Gibson, now, you taught me back in high school. I don't want to say the year because I don't want our ages, to be broadcast over the waves, but
Senior.
Maybe you can teach everyone now about your part in the regattas and how you got into sailing.
Okay, first, good evening to everybody. I am from Crooked Island, really, and what they used to tell me when I went into regatta, this regatta now, they telling me that Crooked Island people don't know anything about sailing. Well, I know some of them learned some good lessons from, the boats that I built, but most of you who know me, I was an educator for 46 years. I'm now retired, but my heart was in boats because my father was a lighthouse keeper, so I was all about around hole in the wall and all over the different places. And right now, we have a lot of things that is being done with boats and regattas, because then again, you can find young people, women and men that we have now with trying to learn how to sail. And I, of course, build boats, make sails, and everything.
I right here, I know you're active. You're telling me now you're retired from teaching. There's no regattas,
That's right.
no sailing. What are you doing? Tell me, what are you doing?
Well, I guess the only person who isn't mad with me right now for the way I'm acting is my grandson.
And to spend more time.
Yeah, because I'm home with him more than any place else. And you see, they was crazy enough to name him after me. So, you know, I have to take care of him. But, you know, this is a big missing, and God knows many times. Sometimes I go there and look back at old tapes and all sorts of different things. I draw. I was an art teacher. I was drawing this boat, doing all sorts of different things. But I believe we're seeing the end of the tunnel now, and I'm feeling good about it.
It would have been good because last week some of us may have been in Barry Tarry, and then next week we would have been heading down to Long Island.
That's right. Long Island would have been this week.
Well, Fisher, we've heard about the first regatta, but we didn't let them mention the classes. Was there any classes during the first regattas? I mean, we have the A, the B, and if you let Donnie tell the story, we have the Prime Minister Cup. That's
Okay, Kelsey, the thing what I'd like to mention for persons, for information, when we first started, we had the dinghy boats. That was the smaller ones. And then we had a boat called the sailboat. And a sailboat is one would have the head. It have like it doesn't have a bowsprit on it. You see, it was a boat with a bowsprit. If you noticed on your screen, you had it a while ago. Those are the boat, call it bowsprit, right? They call it a sailboat. And then the other boat, we call it a vessel. The vessel didn't have a bowsprit in the front of it. Now, those boats used to race back in the day as well. And those used to be the boats that come to Nassau from Anderson, all those places, to bring the conch, the fish, the crawfish, and like. And I'd like to just mention here right now most of the things that I learned from the National Family Island Regatta when I first went there is from Dr. W.G. McPhee. That he gave me a lot of history about, you know, how they used to do and how Danny them tried to rob him, and he had to come and tell him about the rules, you see, and that's how the rules and whatnot started.
But Mr. Gibson, we all know history is a very important part of sailing here in the country, and it may vary from different island to island. So can you give us a piece of history from the Crooked Island
Yes.
regattas?
Well, Crooked Island on TV tonight. Yes, well, in Crooked Island, like I was saying, and it was not only Crooked Island with me, because like I told you, my father was a lighthouse keeper, and he went to just about every lighthouse in the country. I was in Abaco, and then I was at Castle Island, and then I went to school in Inagua for 2 years. But all of those places, they had some form of sailboats. And of course, the situation in Crooked Island was we used to race up there from fishing. Everybody go fishing in the same area down there, Bird Rock Lighthouse. And then when you see people put up only because our dinghy boats had jibs in those days. Now, when I went to regatta, the 17-foot dinghy boat don't have jibs, but we had it. And anytime you see everybody start hoisting the jib and moving, that means time to go home. And then we get to a place where we get almost together, then everybody race from down by Bird Rock to go up to Landville Point, and that used to be something else. And then sometime after that, we used to race from Landville Point to Long Key, which is about 8 miles. And Long Key was the seat of government then. That was the capital in Crooked Island, Auckland's and Long Key. And so that's the way we got into it. My father was a lighthouse keeper, but I had an uncle named Everett Gibson. He was a boat builder. And then that's who I learned from. And then when I came down here to Nassau, I connected with the Ragged Island people. And then, of course, I'll never forget and always mention Reuben Knowles, who taught me really a lot. And then he was one of the people who used to go to school with me and helped me to teach the children. Well, he died a couple of years ago, but I'll always remember Reuben Knowles.
We are in the regatta fever, even though they are not out on the waters. Oh, yes, I miss Barry Tari, and yes, I miss a long time as well. We go to the break with DJ Pat.
Can't you see? He said I done lost.
That boom, boom, boom. That's what I came here for. Give me that. Give me that. Give me that. Oh, give me that. Give me that. Give me.
Welcome back. This is a part 2 of a 5-part series, the story of sailing here in the Bahamas. I'm also joined by my co-host, he's very handsome, Mr. Charles Leonard Fisher. Via Zoom, we have Danny Strawn, he's out of Exuma. And from Crooked Island, my teacher, yeah, he taught me a lot, Mr. Sheldon Gibson, and Mr. Race Starter, Stafford Brister. But before we get to anything else, we need to tell the public how we were able to move sailing for bringing goods to the family islands and throughout the islands into a racing community. Any one of you gentlemen can answer that question.
But I can tell you for what we would do when you go into settlements or other island. I remember the story about the people going from Ragged Island to Cat Island, and they used to use sailboat, and they used to do trading. We had some boats that even used to go to Cuba to trade. The late Captain Edgar Moxie, he told me stories about how they used to go to Cuba and Haiti to pick up stuff and bring it back to the Bahamas. And between Cat Island and Ragged Island had salt, but they didn't have much land to grow like provisions like potatoes and stuff like that, and peas and corn and all of that. So what they used to do is trade between Cat Island and Ragged Island. So that was one form of sailing as well, and all of that was done by sailboats. Even when we come to Nassau to sell our wares, people would buy, they wouldn't buy no ticket, but you know, you pay a little fee to come to Nassau on the vessel to sell your crab and stuff come from under selling crab, coconut, peas, and corn and all of that.
Well, Mr. Gibson, I hope that's the same story for you down there in Crooked Island. I know we've had a lot of discussion, especially during a meeting with Danny, about how things were going.
Yes, well, sailing was always in the regatta was for senior people. But when I came in, Stafford, in fact, Stafford's daughter was the president of the sailing club in C.V. Bedford. And so we had, I sat down with Stafford, Clyde Roll, Danny, Sir Derwit, all the rest of them, and try to see if we can get children back into it. I wasn't allowed to go to Crooked Island to do that yet, but I know I'm going to go back to Crooked Island to try to see if I can teach them to build boats again, because my uncle, I don't want what he taught me to go to waste, so far as Crooked Island is concerned, because I learned how to sail from my uncle, Everett Gibson. In fact, the EV in Udiva is him. That's Everett Vlock Gibson. Well, Udiva's name is a lot of family names mixed up together. That's the way it is. But I would like to mention Uncle Everett, because then again, he taught me a lot. And like I say, when I came down here, other ones. But the children's race, we started with the C-class boat. And the people who had the C-class boats, they didn't want the children to use it, because then again, if that get damaged, and then the big race was after that, because we used to do it on the Tuesday in Georgetown, and then Wednesday began cup races, and then Thursday, the rest of the big race and the rest of it. So we had to come up with something, and I could never forget the meeting that went down with Sir Derwit, myself, Danny, and Clyde Roll in the hospital. He was in the hospital bed, but he had to get that straightened out. So that's where we get to start with the E-class boats that is around now, and that's how the sailing, now have a junior part of it, and I'm very proud of it. And what Clyde did, and then of course what Dallas Knowles is doing in Exuma right now. But I have to get it to Crooked Island. Don't worry, I going home in August.
Tony, what makes the sport of sailing so unique?
I'm sorry, Charles.
What makes the sport of sailing so unique?
Well, what makes it so unique is the fact that it's the only kind of sailing in the whole entire world. That's the first thing. Secondly, the sailboats are not the norm. For instance, we have a 28-foot boat carrying, a 60-foot mast and a span of sail. That is the uniqueness about, our boats. And they're all hand-built. They're not built by machine. For instance, in the Olympic, you can go into maybe Walmart and buy a boat and take it to the Olympics. But in the Bahamas, you have to build it. And it's a labor of love when you sit down and listen to Mark Knowles or the Long Island and Buzzy Roll and all of those guys, Huey Lloyd and Barratari, the boat builders. It's just amazing. It's just unique. And the fact is, this is the only kind of boats you will find any place other than, you can't find it any other place other than in the Bahamas. And that's what makes it so unique. And the fact is also, it's not international sailing. When we sail, when we start our races, all the boats are at anchor. In international sailing, they have what you may call a flying style. That fascinates a lot of writers. They just can't believe in the way we do it. That's what makes it so unique from other forms of sailing throughout the world.
Well, I've sailed once. I don't know if Kelsey have ever been on a boat. I've sailed once.
Actually, I started
those
a
guys,
race.
I must say I'm very impressed with them. I put on a life vest when I could swim, but I had to put on a life vest when I go. And where did riding the pry come from? That's what I want to know, because they're out there. Where did riding the pry come from?
Well, the pry came about because of, like Danny mentioned a while ago, you have a 28-foot boat with a 60-foot mast. Now, on our boats, the keels is only 24 inches below the boat. If you see those yachts, those international yachts, they are very, very deep, 12 feet, 8 feet keel, so that can keep that boat up. But the pry is a form of keeping the boat steady because of the amount of sail and mast that you are carrying. It balances the boat. When, back in the day, we used to use sandbags, but you had to drag those sandbags across the deck, and that was kind of difficult. Then we used to use the oar, and then we had something in the boat called the footling. We used to take that out of the boat and put that on the side to keep the boat steady. But the pry itself is to keep the boat steady on the water, keep it from tumbling over.
Tipping over.
And you have to be a certain age to go on these boats?
Now, let's not deal with that age too much, because there's some guys who sailed until they was
80.
very seasoned. Like Mr. Knowles, for instance.
Yes.
He always called me his son, right? And Shelton Gibson is very special to Mr. Knowles. Mr. Knowles was sailing, he was 80-odd years old. Clement Fox, Edgar Moxie. They were sailing until they was up in the 80s. So the age don't make a difference, it's the condition that you're in. And most of those guys, they're well conditioned, because when they used to go to sea, they tell you straight and plain, they used to eat the right things. They used to eat the lobster, the turtle, what do you call it? Sheldon, what the name?
Callipee.
The callipee of the turtle, conch, there's something else of the turtle. You just say what I say. But that's to make those guys, as far as they're concerned, to make their back strong. They drink a lot of strong back tea. The guys on the island, he was eating natural food. And so they were strong fellas. So I remember a fella like in South Islanders, like Hardy McKinney and those guys, when they was like 70, 80 years old, they were building vessels. They were still building boats and going out to sea.
Why do you guys look so relaxed out there on the Pride? I saw some of the video we were rolling just now. They were like in their front room watching TV, just sitting on the Pride in the deep ocean water.
It's nothing like when you get used, and then of course it's a thing of balance. And they're out there, and if you notice where their feet are, sometimes you have to take that and put both of them together, and like they say, hook it around the Pride to keep you up there, because if you see that boat was to lean over hard, the first thing that's going to happen, the people on the Pride will slide straight down on the boat, and sometimes you end up in the sail. I've seen that happen, but that Pride riding is an art, to tell you the truth, because You have to know how to stay on that, and then to move your weight according to how far over the boat is leaning too.
Well, it's not Christmas, but we are giving out some prizes tonight. Can you give us one of the inductees into the National Family Island Regatta Hall of Fame? You can call or WhatsApp your answers to 424-6811 or 427-1811. First correct answer wins. We are giving away 2 prizes tonight, backyard farming kits.
It's a great prize.
Once again, name one of the 7 inductees into the first National Family Island Hall of Fame. The numbers to call, 424-6311 or 427-1481. Once again, 424-6311, 427-1481.
Hope you are ready to mash the roach or do some heel and toe, because we have none other than Miss Veronica Bishop in the house, who will be taking it away.
Lord, where you think this man? All day been on with these little baby kids, and he ain't reached home yet. Well, I can call down the road to see if this place down the road and the feet down there reach the problems. Cause I got a headache and I tired, man. Every other night, Andrew would call round 8, telling nice little wife he gotta work late, but he'll go to the bar to catch a few with the boys, play dominoes, drink liquor and make noise. Now Andrew say, man, you gotta be the king of your house, so make up your mind if you're gonna be man or mouse. The bartender shot across the room, if Andrew there. Andrew sent a boy to tell him I ain't here, and she said, tell her I ain't here, he better come home now. Oh, these little children need that, they're crying for their parents. They're crying for their parents. He wouldn't like it if I hadn't come to that bar. Oh no, tell her I ain't here, he better come now. Listen, y'all better tell Andrew get to the school now, because he wouldn't like me to come down there to that bar. Not tonight. You hear me? Now Andrew tell the bartender man, let me make this clear. The next time my wife called this bar, tell her I ain't here. He said when man having fun, woman gotta leave him alone. When his wife phoned her bar, she heard his voice over the phone. And what she say? She say, I ain't here. Boy, this man better come home now, you know. Oh, you ain't hear all this noise. They're crying for their pa. Boy, let me tell you something. Oh, no. I need no harm with the him woman go. He better come home now. the phone ring again. All Andrew boys start laughing at him. Now Andrew had to make one more stand for the boys. He said, I going home before I hear noise. But Andrew didn't know it. His wife was still on the phone. And she said, tell her I ain't here. You better come home. And she said, tell her I ain't here. Come on now. Oh, these little children, they crying for their pop. They're crying for their pop. He wouldn't like it if I hadn't come to that part. Oh no. Tell her I ain't here. He better come now. So tell her I ain't here. He better come now. He better come now. He better come now. Tell him. He better come now. He better come right now. Not tomorrow, but tonight, yeah. He better come now. He better come right now. He better come now.
Well, I'm ready
He
to
better
take off
come
my
now. Tell him.
shoes. You know how we do the regatta and slippers and short pants, straw hat. But and tell them I ain't going home tonight, but we in curfew. Oh, I really miss. You know, we didn't appreciate regattas and
Any of the festivals.
being out and stuff like that. Now we under this lockdown and everybody. I wish I could go to regatta. I wish I could do the regatta.
What your grandmother used to tell you, Fisher? You don't miss it until
Till it's gone.
Until it's gone.
And I talk about two legends of the sports that's gone. What's significance and how does he go down in history? King Eric Gibson.
What I can say about King Eric, I worked consecutively with King Eric as the treasurer of the BBOSA while he served as Commodore. I knew him before that, and around sailing, King Eric was the one who invented the pry, as a matter of fact, in Georgetown. He's the first one who brought the pry in Georgetown. But King Eric was a man who loved sailing. He always find a way to lose a race, even when he leading the race. But when you talk about sailing and looking out for the rights of sailors, King Eric was the man. I work with him. He work you hard. He's a determined fella. He worked very hard to see that the boat owners get what they deserve. You know, that the sailors get whatever they deserve from sailing. And he was determined to bring sailing to the forefront because I remember in 1992, we only had like 3 major regattas at that time. By the time King Eric leave the scene, we was up to, we have about 20 major regattas now. Like, he was instrumental in forming, along with his executive committee, myself, Clyde Roll, and Kirk Wallace and those other guys, in forming most of the major regattas that we have now, except for the Long Island and the National Family Island Regatta. And another Auckland's man I'd just like to mention here now, who was really determined in keeping sailing going. He eats sailing, sleep sailing, and that was Baba J. I worked with him for many years doing the Catch Me If You Can, some Valentine Regatta, and he's another gentleman who really had sailing at heart.
Danny, how would you say King Eric will go down in history?
King Eric will go down in history apart from the fact that he was a great musician. In terms of sailing, I think his legacy would be, as Stafford mentioned, he invented the pry, which came at a very good time. The fact that we have these huge masts in these boats, and you needed something really to level up the boat. We used to sail with sand. Sand just so it was important that you had the pry to steady the boat while you're sailing. And the second thing that he would be remembered for is the fact that he was a sail builder. He built most of the sails you see on many of the boats, not now, but in years gone by, building sails for all practically every boat, A, B, C, D, and E. And while people regard him as being controversial, he always had the sport at hand. He never did anything that would probably deter or take away from the sport.
And Sheldon,
So
as a
that's why he was
sale,
viewed as a great contributor to the sport.
as a sailmaker, Sheldon, your impression of King.
Yes, well, King Eric, I would like to say something here that plenty people, well, I don't know if everybody, because I think he did it to everyone. King Eric will call you at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
If he wake up and he has something in his head, he'll call you at 4 o'clock in the morning. And where I used to go, in fact, I make my own sales now. And I got my start from King Eric, and I would like to also mention that Stefano Kemp, who's now making sales, that he started off with King Eric, and of course he was one of my students in CV Bethel. So that's how he got involved in it, and he's doing quite well with his sale making now. And all of that came from King Eric, and King Eric was a person we stay arguing, but we can't do without each other. So that's the way sometimes. And when it's come to pear season, he would call me 4 o'clock in the morning, ask me if the pear tree have any on it. My God.
Well, he has a song named after him, Raleigh Gray, but most of us know him as the Grandmaster. Danny, where did this name, the Grandmaster, come from?
The Grandmaster really came from the fact that Raleigh Gray had dominated, this sport for almost 50 years. And he was honored in Staniel Key back in the late 90s. And people started talking about, he was simply the best. So people tried to find names as to what you call him. And so I can't remember who mentioned the name. Papa mentioned it during the first, program. But everybody felt that since he was the best, he needed to have a name that stood out among just a regular, outstanding skipper. And the name stuck, and they call him the Grandmaster. So that's why you see on his mail boat, it was the Grandmaster.
Well, Fisher,
He's simply the best.
well, it looks like some of the best skippers and sailors and sailmakers came from the island of Auckland. That's where my dad is from. Let me throw that in, Auckland. As well as Exuma. I can't leave with my grandmother's roots, Hermitage all the way, right, Danny? Well,
Right.
Before we toss it to a break, I just want everyone to know that we have another live performance. Fish, I hope I can see you sculling, Do some of the things that they say on the regatta. You ready?
All right, let me take off this jacket. We're going to the break. I'm trying to get, I in the feeling
You
right
put
now.
on the WD-40 tonight to make sure you're good? Because I don't think you're as nimble as the old skippers used to be. But we have Gino D on the other side of the break.
Phuket Island, just me and you. We can say I, just me and you. Just me and you. Phuket Island, Phuket Island, Phuket Island.
Before we get into the entertainment, we have our winners tonight. Shamara Lloyd, and Charlotte is telling us that is one of his schoolmates. And out of Mangrove Key, Bernadette Johnson, they won a backyard farming kit. And then the producer of this show, he's in a giving mood. He's playing Santa early. He said you're also going to get some goodies, so you can pick up your gifts tomorrow at the Ministry of Agriculture and Marine Resources.
Well, Fisher, I'm hoping that I get a nice prize before I leave out tonight for doing this beautiful introduction. I mean, there's a sailing boat named after him, but before we get to the performance, we just want to ask Stafford exactly who built that sailing boat named after the famous song we're about to hear in about 15, 20 seconds.
Damien Stewart, a young man, his mother's from Andres, his daddy's from Exuma. And he built, after Gino D sang that song, he liked it so much. He built a boat. He had everybody in Georgetown, everybody in Monaco wearing a Junglist t-shirt.
So Junglist is
Damien Stewart.
It's not only a master on the sea, but it's also on the shoreline as well.
On the shoreline.
So, Fisher, maybe you can tell me the answers for the
answer, yes. The
questions?
winners, once again, Shamara Lloyd and Bernadette Johnson out of Mangrove Key. And the answers, the first inductees into the National Family Island Regatta Hall of Fame. And back in October 5th, 1990, which is a little comeback then, Raleigh Gray, Bobby Simonet, Harlan Bottomley, Hezron Moxley, Captain Freddie Brown, Linton Reagan, Reginald Bull Reg Roll. Any one of those answers would have given you a prize of a backyard farming kit, and I'd like to see what those other goodies are.
Well, I may not have on orange pants, but I do have lime green nails. I am thinking, drum roll please, it's time for the Junglist.
Hey, good night, good night. Good night, Bahamas. We're gonna take you back. Regatta time. Let's do this, man. Thought the love that we had was true. I thought I couldn't live without you. But then I found you was a junglist, causing me all kind of stress, yeah. I did everything a man could do. Bought you fancy clothes and diamonds too. But you turned out to be a rambling rose. Now you better pack up your clothes. Y'all go do what you wanna do. I can't tell you, suck it too. Spread your joy, y'all, if that's your thing. But I ain't gonna be no fool. I said, give me back my ring. I ain't gonna let you keep a thing. Hey! She drive a lime green Maxima. One of the many things I bought for her. But still she gone, scheme on me. Riding around the town with Stevie wearing orange top with purple tights. Green earring and bracelet, lipstick white. Rainbow weave with blue eyeshadow. Red belt and yellow stiletto. Can't go do what you wanna do. I can't tell you, suck it too. Spread your joy, yeah, if that's your thing. But I ain't gonna be no fool. I'm tired getting swing. Hey! Any Saxons in the house? Any Valley boys in this place? Roots! Hey. Come on, y'all. We got a time, y'all. Hey! Yeah! She hanging out in the bar, she drinking rum. Watching her whip and clicking her gum. Watch out, boys, here she comes. She looking for another victim. 4 times she done been on Maureen, trying to find her baby daddy, yeah. She took me to take her DNA, came back in a negative way, yeah. Y'all go do what you wanna do. I can't tell you what to suck it to. Spread your joy if that's your thing, but I ain't gonna be no fool. Right to straight. Come on, DJ Pop. Bitch,